Welcome to Lucid's webinar series. We are excited to be kicking off our fall season a couple of weeks early from a fall officially starting. But if you've spent a summer in San Francisco, you will know it's the coldest summer you'll ever spent, and it's kind of like being in fall through August. Today we're going to talk about how to run an effective resource reduction competition, and super excited for this. As we go through with some of our wonderful customers that are out there creating competitions and executing them and seeing some great results as well. So it'll be great to get some firsthand advice on how to prepare and plan for a competition, how to build the engagement, and also how to then measure success in terms of the metrics that you want to take a look at for judging whether this was a successful competition or not. So we'll also have some time at the end for some Q&A, but I would recommend that use the chat feature or the questions feature in the webinar to send questions in as we go along, and we'll try to address them throughout the conversation. So who do we have here? We have Abigail Karp she's one of our marketing managers here at Lucid, and works closely with a lot of our customers doing the competitions and has played an active role in building out our competition solution, and for many years has been organizing our Campus Conservation National efforts. We also have Tristan Coffin from Whole Foods. Tristan?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So he's launching some of the energy competitions at Whole Foods. Then we have who could potentially be the highest profile personality in the Northwest when it comes to energy competitions, as he has become a common figure at the Gonzaga basketball games and other events at Gonzaga University. Jim, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And then we're also excited to have George Radke with us. George actually heads up what I believe is the fastest growing school district in the country. So he's got his hands full in managing the facilities operations there. George, great to have you.
It's good to be here, and that is correct. Since 2003, we've added over 60 new buildings, and we have 4 that are being completed this fall, a high school, a middle school, and 2 elementaries, and it seems like it just never stops. So, but yeah, anyway, we're growing like crazy, and getting people involved with the saving energy is fun, and it's also rewarding.
Great, and I think it's wonderful too, as being at the forefront of the education of people. And I think that's a common thread that we'll hear throughout the conversation today, is that education is such a big part of these competitions and doing that. So first, we'll hear from Abby, and Abby's going to tell us a little bit about the energy reduction competition, what she's learned in being a part of hundreds, maybe actually thousands of different competitions that have gone on leveraging Lucid. So Abby, please.
Thanks, Rolf. So I'll jump into an overview of competitions and some steps for success that we've outlined. Lucid has been working with our customers and helping them run competitions for about the last 10 years or so. And we first launched Campus Conservation Nationals, which is a energy reduction competition program for colleges and universities in 2010. So we've helped specifically colleges and universities run CCN competitions for the last 7 years, helping hundreds of schools, and we've recently expanded that to any type of organization. So we're excited to broaden this so that we can make sure that all of our customers are able to use these best practices for their competitions. So a quick overview, an energy reduction competition is a competition to see which building or space in your portfolio can achieve the biggest % reduction over a period of time. So we compare a competition period to a baseline period, which means that that can be as long as you want or as short as you want. So based on our work with our customers, we've outlined 5 steps to competition success. The first is to form an organizing team because you can't run a competition by yourself. The second is to outline your structure and design of your competition. Next, identify and set up your data. Develop an engagement plan, and lastly, actually implement your plan. So we'll quickly go into each of these steps. First, in forming a competition organizing team, you'll want to determine roles for each person on your team and get a variety of people involved. So we found our customers report that they've had the most success with team members having 4 to 7 people on their organizing team. There's too many and it gets too complicated to actually get things done, but too few and everyone has too much to do in addition to what's likely already a full-time job. So we recommend getting someone involved who can represent each of the buildings that'll be participating. So if you have hundreds, you don't want 100 people on your team, but you want someone who can represent those. But if you just have a handful of buildings participating, it may be useful to have someone from each of those buildings or spaces join the team so they can effectively plan events. In figuring out your competition structure and design, the first question you'll have to address is whether you want to run a short-term competition or a long-term competition. We've seen a lot of successful short-term competitions at Lucid, and these are typically between 2 and 4 weeks long. That tends to be the sweet spot, because it's the right amount of time to get participants excited and pumped up about participating and actually reducing their energy, but it's not long enough that their energy will start to fade by the end. And counter to that, there's also the option of running a longer term competition for either a full semester for a school or for a full year even. So this is also a popular option if you're trying to encourage, in particular, the adoption of long-term behavioral practices. So once you determine that, the next step is to figure out who's actually going to be participating. So choosing your, whether it's groups of buildings, spaces, or people, and then figuring out what dates to set the competition for. And coming up with the dates for your competition, a few considerations are when people might be going out on vacation, whether it's a school break or a common work break. So summers are not usually the best time for competition since so many people are traveling over the summer, but spring and fall tend to be really good options for that. And you can set your baseline. We call the great baseline debate, is choosing whether to set your baseline immediately before the competition or using data from the year before. And there's pros and cons of each, but we typically recommend setting it before your competition date instead of the year before, since that the year before can account for any changes in occupancy or kind of big weather changes year to year. So our third step, once you've figured out the design of your competition, is to actually set up your data. Competitions won't be as effective if you're not actively measuring and reporting on the progress of your competition. And so if you are using Building OS, there's a really easy way to do this in our competitions app. But if you're not using Building OS, then you'll have to figure out how you're collecting the data and then how you'll be able to share that data, because participants will be much more motivated if they're able to see how they're doing based on their baseline and compared to the other participants in the competition. So the next step is really where it gets fun, and that's figuring out what sort of events and activities you can plan to help get your participants involved. So it's not just about you setting up the competition, it's getting employees involved, getting students involved, it's getting staff involved, and getting facilities involved if possible too. You can choose theming and branding for your competition. You can come up with events to get people excited and engaged, and include in your engagement plan how you'll educate people about how they can reduce their energy. Because it's not just telling them that the competition's happening, but making sure that they have actionable things to do so they know how to reduce their energy during this time. And then lastly, actually compete to reduce. So once you've set everything up, implementing your plan and using kind of live feedback to understand how you're doing and changing things as you go if that needs to happen. So we have a few examples here of some competition branding that we've seen from our customers in previous years. So there's a lot of creativity and fun involved here. So I think the key here is to be able to channel that and figure out what makes sense for your organization.
That's great. Thanks, Abby, for that. And, I just love seeing this in slide with all the slogans that are all these really great puns. This is like the world of puns right here of how to do it. So that's great. In terms of these 5 steps, now let's maybe talk a little bit and learn a little bit about what Tristan is doing at Whole Foods, specifically around preparing for some of these competitions that he's going to be launching shortly. Tristan?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. And just to provide a little quick introduction of who I am, Director of Sustainability and Facilities for Whole Foods Market, our Northern California division. So I oversee 45 facilities here in Northern California, Northern Nevada, specifically focused on built environment. The 4 pillars that I focus on are energy, waste, water, and refrigerant, being that we're a grocery store, and among many other things, but I won't go into details because those are all relevant for this conversation. So bit of a newbie to this conversation as it relates to competitions. We actually haven't gone forward with our first competition with Lucid just yet. As you can see here, we're planning for fall of 2017. So we'll have a 3-week period. The first week will be a baseline period, as Abby was just referring to, and then the second 2 weeks of October will be the actual competition amongst 3 of our Bay Area stores. Harrison, which is located in Oakland, Petaluma, and Mill Valley. So we're really excited to kick the competition off.
Thanks, Tristan. That's great. Jim, maybe a quick introduction about yourself and what you're doing. You're a veteran at this.
I guess I'd like to think that. Thank you. So my name is Jim Simon. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. I've been in this role for about 3 years, and I'm called to, or asked to help create a culture of sustainability here at Gonzaga and implement our climate action plan. And so it's been great over the last few years to be able to use Building OS to assist in both those areas. And specifically last year in our work with CCN 2017, the work we did to save the energy and save the dollars through participating. And I think Abby can correct me, I think we placed 3rd overall, which was great to celebrate here.
That's right.
Well, you may have placed 3rd, but you're always number 1 in our hearts. So,
well, I guess to the nation, we're number 2 when it comes to basketball. But thank you for that.
So we have 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We're covering the bases here.
Thank you, Jim. And then lastly, George, if maybe a quick introduction on your background.
Sure. My name is George Radke. I'm the Director of Energy Management for Frisco ISD. I'm starting my 30th year in Frisco ISD. That means I'm old. I started as a high school science teacher. I've been an administrator, principal, assistant principal, now I'm Director of Energy Management for the last 9 years. So one of the things, being the fastest school district in the country, adding between 2,500 and 3,000 new students every year, which is just crazy when you think about it. Our construction department and the folks that build our buildings have done a great job building energy efficient buildings, but one of the things I knew we were missing was participant engagement. So I've been with Lucid for a little over a year now, and I'm seeing that that was a wise decision. We started our first competition last fall 2016, and since we'd only gotten our data, our interval data, for a few months, we did it to where we compared September, October, November of last year to December, January, and February. Not exactly apples to apples, but still pretty good. With 70-some schools involved, we divided it up into 7 teams, about 9 or 10 schools in each team, and I tried to base it on similar schools, year they were built or how they were designed. And at the end of the competition, the charts were showing us that we had reduced our energy consumption by about 4.5 million kilowatt hours. And I looked at that and I went, wow, that's a lot. And we pay between 9, 11.5, 12 cents per kilowatt hour, depending on the school and demand charges and so on. So I just figured 10 cents. Well, that's about $460,000. So I sent an email out to everybody congratulating them that we had saved over $400,000. Everybody was all excited about that because we did give cash prizes to the winners. We gave $2,000 to first place in each group, which seems like a lot. $1,500 for second, $1,000 for third, and $500 for fourth. So we spent $35,000 in incentive money. When I got the actual bills in and calculated it, we had actually saved $543,588. So we invested that $35,000, saved over $500,000 for that one contest, and we were really excited about the results. The schools were excited. The kids were excited. They got money for their activity fund, and the schools got to decide how they were going to use that. We obviously sent out emails to everyone. Our CATE Center, Career and Technology Education Center, they came and they did a TV interview with me, and I explained the competition and how it worked and how it came out. They put that on their the district TV. Also, I've done presentations to several high school, middle school classrooms on how all this worked. We did have a team at one of our high schools, Lebanon Trail High School, at the same time in this competition. They're involved in the Lexus Echo Challenge, which the subject that they picked was how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So they used, I met with them 3 or 4 times and gave them access to Building OS so that they could go in and look at their CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions reduction and so on. So they came up with a lot of neat ideas. They did a PowerPoint. They started what was called a Half Watt Wednesday and got a bunch of schools involved with that and tweeting.
Yeah,
those guys.
George, let's why don't we save some of that for your section later on, because there's some great stuff that you have there in terms of the metrics that you were tracking and then how that impacts the kind of further down the road. So it's such a wonderful story in terms of like the snowball effect that can happen with this type of a competition. So let's pick that up when we get to your section in just a little bit. Does that work?
Okay.
All right. Sorry to sort of cut you off on that one.
That's fine.
So why don't we now go back to sort of the beginning of planning a successful competition. And, Trista, maybe you can tell us a little bit about, you're really going through this effort right now for the first time with your group. So I think it's a wonderful perspective, and I'd love to hear sort of about what you're going through, and then we'll get some commentary also from Jim and from George and from Abby. Put you on the hot seat a little bit.
Love it. Great to be on the hot seat. Well, the easy answer to the first question in regards to how do you plan an energy reduction competition is to follow the steps that Abby just outlined, but to provide a little bit more color, seeing as I'm literally going through that process as we speak. First and foremost is to identify locations, and that doesn't necessarily come easy, being that we have multiple locations, and what's the right number to engage right off the bat. Certainly you don't want to choose too many locations because you may lose track of the opportunity to really engage each of the different team member bases or employee bases at each of those locations if you include too many facilities or stores, as we would refer to them as. And then, which stores are the right pick if you're going to limit those that you do choose for the competition. So for us, we really wanted to look at locations that we had recently done energy upgrades at. and similar energy upgrades. So we didn't want to be doing one energy upgrade at one store that was significantly different from another energy upgrade at another store. So we really focused and honed in on 3 locations where we were doing similar energy upgrades in the form of retail overhead lighting, case door retrofits or upgrades. So we're adding doors to our refrigerated cases that were previously open, as well as controls or EMS, BMS upgrades to those locations. And the reason that we wanted to do that or include those specific stores in the competition was, one, to highlight the fact that we were providing technology upgrades to these locations, but also really drive home the point that behavioral change can play a very important role in energy reduction goals. We've learned over the years that we can hit targets with obviously the introduction of new technologies on energy conservation measures, but it's really important that the employees or team members, as we refer to them, are engaged in that process, because we can drive upwards to an additional 5 to 10% energy savings if we look at behavioral change. Who's involved in the planning process? There's several folks, as I just referred to, in terms of planning, including at the highest level, myself, and then my close colleagues on my small team that I manage here. But then getting into the stores and ensuring that the folks that are leading those particular facilities, we refer to them as store team leaders, are engaged in the process. And then it's a trickle-down effect from there. So we're at a point now where we're beginning to engage, I guess, what most folks would refer to as kind of middle-level management. We refer to them as our team leaders. So our department team leaders that are usually tasked with running departments like bakery and prepared foods and produce, to get them involved in the process. So we're going to be reaching out to them in the middle of September to get them involved in the idea of behavioral change in their individual departments. So some examples of how they could potentially be involved ties into the techniques that we use to tailor competitions to our unique environment, that being a grocery store in this instance. So some of the ideas that we want to throw out there to these team leaders that can then engage their team members in the individual departments are really green tips, as we're coining them. So in a grocery store, for example, that could be thinking about things like closing walk-in freezer and refrigerated doors. Just to give you an example of the type of impact that can make from literally just a behavioral change, it costs us about $1,000 on average in lost sales for every hour a walk-in door is left open. And that's a combination. It's not just if the door is left open for an hour flat out. It's a combination of 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and all the walk-in doors throughout any given facility. So we can really instill, I think, quite a bit of information in the team member base for them to then engage and hopefully drive energy reduction. If I were to go back to part of the planning process and how we, really lay out some of the metrics that are going to drive the competition. Typically in the past, what we've done is look at kilowatt hours saved per square foot, and that's typically our baseline. But what's challenging using that baseline versus what we've worked on with Lucid, which is percentage reduction using a baseline a week ahead of the competition that we're going to be rolling out come October, is that it's not a common denominator so much as the percentage reduction, in that every one of our stores is oftentimes defined as a snowflake because each facility is different. So some stores may have large full production kitchens, other stores may not. Some stores have scratch bakeries, other stores may not. So the square footage common denominator isn't necessarily the best way to judge a store. So we're really excited to be taking to the next level using the Building OS tool to engage the team members, create a better baseline, and really drive what we hope to be a successful competition.
That's great. There's a lot of good stuff. Really, I think important is the preparation that you're doing in terms of the metrics, right? I mean, there's a lot of analysis that's going into this for you to be able to then judge whether there was positive impact from this competition. I think that's probably something to really underscore in this is to be able to take the time to do that, because only that will then set you up in the future to say, okay, am I doing this? Am I impacting positively? And I think like everything else, it then in the engagement and getting people excited about it, they can then see I'm doing things that impact these metrics and so forth. And I think that's a great transition to Jim, who can talk a little bit about how creating that excitement and that engagement, which obviously then becomes a big part of the efficacy of these competition efforts.
Yeah, thank you. So I would look at both these questions kind of as really intertwined. At Gonzaga and at all colleges and universities, we have essentially, three populations: students, faculty, and staff. And so when we think about marketing the competitions to our building occupants, whether they're in an office or a classroom or a residence hall, we're going to use the tools that are available to us to help get that message to those audiences. Here at Gonzaga, we have something called Morning Mail that goes out every morning and is primarily targeted to our faculty and staff. We have a monthly sustainability newsletter. We also use social media, which, as you could imagine, students respond to that fairly well. So then the question becomes, how do you empower each of those populations to help get the word out about competitions, meeting them where they are, and in some cases only where they want to be met. So for example, I guess using Gonzaga's expression of CCN, to plan our response to CCN, we looked at what energy competition resources already existed on our campus and who was working on them. So we tapped into our residence halls and apartments who had the You Have the Power competition that they do about once a month every year. We brought in Gonzaga Environmental Organization, a student group that had a Lights Out Gonzaga campaign that they did during Earth Week to try to turn off the lights during that time. And so we brought those stakeholders together and said, how do we get the word out? So how do we do that, and how do we build excitement and generate that engagement? I think we just simply thought differently about how to build engagement. We specifically tapped into Gonzaga's rich culture and traditions that are here, and we delivered our messages in familiar ways. And so we did two primary things that I'll talk about to raise awareness on our recent campaign, both of which, as I think you'll understand in a second, made me feel kind of anxious. The first one is some of you may know that Gonzaga has a basketball team, and there was this little tournament in March or April last year that we did fairly well in. And so our home basketball games are really exhilarating. We have a great student section. And so in addition to a never-ending sea of red, white, and blue, our kennel club, or our student section, prints giant heads of some of our basketball players making goofy faces. Over the years, other personalities have made it into the kennel, kind of floating through the crowd, including the Pope, well-known Gonzaga Jesuit priests, and during the CCN competition period, yours truly. So when we thought about how to build excitement and engagement, we thought, well, where are we going to really get the attention of a lot of people, and a lot of people that are kind of in a captured audience? And so we thought of Gonzaga basketball games. And so for at least one game, I never saw it again, there was a giant, probably 6-foot cut out of my head that was floating around the student section of the basketball games. So a friend sent me a photo. I think I saw my eyebrow popping in the crowd, but it worked. And so right after the game, people started reaching out, texting, say, why was your head floating in the crowd? So that was a good way to start a conversation about, this is what we're doing. This is the competition that we're entering into. And then second, immediately following the basketball game, we started posting recreations of some famous internet memes. Some I had never heard of before, but students knew all about them.
So
One of them was Nice Guy.
I'm gonna butt in for a sec. I actually took the liberty of including one of the that you sent me. And I do just want to say, particularly on the basketball note and having the huge blow up of your head, I think that's an amazing way to think of how to engage people who aren't typically responsive to sustainability messages, for example, because not everyone you're going to be working with is going to be really gung-ho about saving energy, but figuring out, like you said, how to meet them where they're at is pretty key. So I included your meme on the right, and I included a couple others for context here. So I'm going to let you explain that a little more.
Yeah, so thanks, Abby, for bringing those up. And they're funny to look at. I didn't know who this little baby was before. And so we recreated memes like this, and we posted them around campus in really prominent places. And so including that, there was this one, there's one for another meme, Nice Guy Greg, and then the most interesting man in the world. And as you can see here, instead of random things about Thursday or Friday, we included energy conservation tips. And this is how we started to introduce CCN on campus. So I learned a lot doing this, and I want to do better this year. We built our occupant engagement using the easily combustible resource of Gonzaga's culture. And so I would invite everyone to tap into your own organization's culture. What is it? What makes it tick? What is the kind of inherent culture that drives your organization? And how do you tap into that to really engage with employees or students or whoever your base is? So not only was I able to build awareness around energy use, I was also able to selfishly assist those that were never aware of my office or who I was to place a name to the face. So that's what I would add to those questions.
Great, Jim. I think that's wonderful kind of hearing about sort of this other part of it. And I think it starts painting sort of really interesting picture, right? In terms of that part of this is definitely science and metrics and the numbers. But then there's the other part of it, which has a lot to do with the human factor, the creativity, and getting individuals excited about it. Because I think we're in the history of what we've seen, and I think, Abby, you can speak to this a little bit in terms of how big of an impact the engagement is in a successful competition, right? I mean, it's such a big part.
It's crucial, I think. You can set up a competition and choose your baseline dates and run a competition, but if you're not actually spreading awareness, nothing's going to happen. Because competitions are all about engagement and tapping into that behavior piece, and you can see up to 20-30% savings just from behavior alone in a lot of organizations.
And I think that's part of what we see also is the individuals that put sort of the effort in at the beginning, like Tristan was saying. They can then take their energy, no pun intended here, they can take their resources and their attention to focusing on the engagement rather than spending all their time and energy updating spreadsheets and running down different stats and metrics and numbers. The focus can be exclusively on doing some things that even if Jim tries to be sort of modest about his celebrity status, I think he enjoys it, and I think that's part of the quote unquote fun part of the job. So now going back to combining these two things now then leads to the ability to really look at the success of a competition and how you measure success. And I think George, maybe we can pick up a little bit where we ended before in talking about how you really then sort of publish the success of this. And I think which you've done such a phenomenal job of is really then promoting that success, and that success starts to feed on itself. People get excited about it, and then it sort of snowballs into other efforts that individual schools want to take. So George, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said earlier, we initially reported a success with the estimate of the dollar amount that was reduced and who the winners were. And then, as I said, as the actual bills came in and we tabulated them, it was even more, about almost $550,000 in savings in actual dollars, which is 24% reduction, which is about what you said, between 20 and 30% if you get the folks involved. So we did a good job with that. The district was very supportive. They did a nice article on the web page where when school was out and the competition was over, that they posted the results of both their competitions up there and explained that. I actually had several parents call me. Several of them were in other businesses, Marriott hotels, a lady that worked for them, and I actually sent that information on to Lucid, but they were wanting to know, they had kids that went to school here and wanted to know, how we save so much money and so on and so forth. The strategies that we've used to keep people involved in that is on our district webpage, there's a link under energy management that takes you to our storyboard. And there are links on our storyboard that show every day what schools are reducing their energy the most. And then every school, all 74, 75 of them have their own storyboard or their own dashboard, which shows electrical use, water use, natural gas, recycling, and then we've added some other cards on weekly, monthly electrical use, and also greenhouse gas emissions, which is one that a lot of the schools like to use as well. We've gotten the science classes involved, the folks that teach environmental science, and even some of the elementary schools where they're supposed to cover energy use and energy management. They've called me and requested specific information, and I put that on their web pages as well. Also, monthly reports to the principals, I send those out to where they get them. They allow me to speak at the principals meetings if I need to or want to, and everybody understands that the money that we save on, it's a fun competition, but everybody does understand anything that we're not spending on utilities goes back directly to benefit the students. And that's the big thing here in Frisco is our motto is we want to know every student by name and need. So that's real important to us, is to be wise stewards of the taxpayers' money and to put that money back where it'll benefit the students.
And I think, George, that's a big part that you've emphasized before in conversations that we've had, where you kind of have a really strong position and opinion about, at the end of the day, there's one metric that really counts, right? In terms of doing these competitions, all the effort, right? There's one metric that you really need to take a look at, because that's what creates the momentum and excitement, and that's dollars, right?
That's correct. And again, that money, we're a nonprofit, and that money all goes back. And I think the parents in the community understand that. Most of them, they appreciate it as well, because their property taxes fund the school district, and they want us to use their money wisely. And this is certainly one way to do it.
Yeah. And Jim, in your world at Gonzaga, in terms of sharing the metrics and then communicating them to different stakeholders, can you share a little bit about that, how you do that, and who the people are that you share that information with?
Sure. I think we have Building OS, and we I guess I would break it off into a few areas. We have our residence halls and apartments that have access to dashboards, touchscreen dashboards at any point in a few of our residence halls and apartments. We also share some of your dashboards as well to the campus community through our newsletter. We also have every year a senior design project where we try to make that available to them if they're working on building kind of campus focused projects. So I like to think that we're kind of building the plane as we fly it. And so we're looking for ways to improve getting the data out there. And so I think listening to the conversation here is helping get some of those ideas moving.
Well, with the analogy of upgrading the truck as you drive it, but building the plane as you fly it makes me a little nervous. But I know that's how you guys roll up there. Maybe Tristan, you can add a little bit to it in terms of you really haven't had to report back yet, but I think the situation you're in, I'd love to hear a little bit about who is pushing in terms of on you in terms of results for the competition, and what's your plan right now in terms of who you're going to be reporting this back to, and what are the metrics that those individuals are going to be looking for?
That's a great question. Thanks. I'll begin by saying, Whole Foods has really kind of been built on a model for competition. It's part of the reason why we've operated as an extremely decentralized organization over the 39 years the company has been in existence. So this kind of aligns really well. And usually that competition is around merchandising and sales and the customer experience, et cetera. So of course, operating expenses and sustainability are two very, very important values that Whole Foods Market, I should say, holds near and dear to its heart. So with that being said, I think everyone is really interested in what their results may bring to the table as it relates to the competition. So I think first and foremost, our priority is to report back to the folks that are participating, that being the team members at the store level, because they're really the ones at the grassroots level that get really excited about the opportunity to drive our sustainability goals. Our green mission, really grew organically at the store level amongst team members that were interested in really fulfilling our core values of supporting environmental stewardship across the company. So those are the people that we're most interested in reporting back to. So we're kind of formulating ideas as to how we may do that, whether we give somehow provide access to the storyboards, provide links on that store team members can go to on their mobile devices, perhaps even have a specific computer dedicated at each of the locations to report back the metrics. And then, at all levels, I think everyone's going to be interested in the success of the competition, from my level up to our regional president and beyond. So we're looking forward to formulating, like I said, how we report those metrics out, which we're still in the process of doing, and then how we incentivize for this competition and potential competitions going forward. So the other panelists are talking about prizes and so forth, and we're still kind of formulating how that could potentially work. But again, I think everyone's excited to learn the type of impact that we can make with this competition at all levels of the organization.
I think it's great that you're not just thinking about planning the competition itself right now, even though you haven't run a competition before, but you're also thinking ahead to these metrics and what will be important, because that will help you shape what you do in terms of events and how you market the competition and how you actually try to achieve those. And I think we've seen a lot of variety, and we've heard from some of the variety here already about what different types of organizations care about in terms of metrics. And for Frisco ISD with George, it's always down to the dollars, because every dollar they save goes back toward teachers' salaries and for school supplies. And so that is what really makes the difference there. But shifting to different types of organizations, sometimes it really is all about percent reduction, or for whether it's other K through 12 districts or schools, it could be people engaged. And I think making sure you're thinking about the metrics and your audience as you plan your competition is key, since marketing a competition to students or employees, or even a competition between facilities staff, will kind of create entirely different obstacles for you to challenge as you plan the competition too.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for the different input on this and sort of all the different perspectives on how to make this sort of a great competition, how to plan it. And I think some of the key takeaways from the panel discussion here has been one, engage a variety of people, right? Whether it's students or employees, sustainability staff, facility staff. I think interesting in Tristan's case in Whole Foods, right? How an important role the store managers and different groups and teams within a store play to different business stakeholders. Then secondly, tap into your organization's culture and values. And I think we heard that very distinctly in all three cases, where Whole Foods has definitely built upon kind of eco-friendly. There is a culture of competition, healthy competition among the different stores. I think obviously tapping into basketball like at Gonzaga, and Jim obviously has. It's interesting, Jim. I think you seem to have a very good bead on the culture of the students and what the students respond to. And then obviously George really understands. I think it's fascinating actually that George, your background comes from being a science teacher and being kind of the feet on the ground in a school system, and having sort of real internalized appreciation for what makes success for the people that are involved, right? And then how you tap into getting teachers and administrators and different people focused and excited about the competition. And then thirdly, is widely promote the competition, publicly share the results. And I think that's one of those things that we see also with, I would say, Gonzaga is a great example of that too, where you do these things on an ongoing basis. It's not a one-time event. And as you do this and make it part of the culture, that you have these initiatives, you have these competitions, I think that's across the board something we see with a lot of our customers is they make it just part of something that they do, part of a culture. And then it's expected and people are excited about it. And they know it's going to be coming, and I think that also then creates the excitement around it. So I think definitely some wonderful takeaways from there. I'll let Abby have the last word in terms of talking about what we started with in terms of the steps for competition success. Abby?
So I just want to reiterate these 5 steps. Thanks, Rolf. I think these are the key to running a competition, but this covers the basics, and the fun part is getting into the engagement plan in particular. And I think one piece of advice that I have after talking with a lot of our customers who have run competitions is start here and don't bite off more than you can chew if you're running your first competition. But as you get more comfortable with it, add something new. So for Jim at Gonzaga, for example, adding something new every year is a way to keep students engaged. They don't get burnt out and just think, oh, it's another energy competition. But introduce something new every time you run a competition to maintain that engagement. And I think that's a really great way to keep people motivated. And so lastly, if you are a Lucid customer already, we want to point you in the direction of some of our resources to help you run competitions. We have the competitions app in Building OS, the Storyboards app to help share your competition results and energy data. We have a guide of how to run a competition in our Learning and Support Hub, and then a more kind of Building OS specific webinar training that we've run for customers before, and we have a recording of that. But that wraps up our content. So we now want to open it up for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please type them into the question section of the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll give you a few minutes to get those in and ask them. We'll answer them as they come up. So we've answered already, we've covered some of these questions already in our content. So I'm going to start with one question for Tristan from Whole Foods. Will Whole Foods have their competition viewable online for the public, either during or after the competition?
That's a very good question. We're still formulating whether or not or how we would potentially engage customers. I think probably for the first competition, we'll probably take the lessons learned and keep them internal to begin. But the goal is to continue with these competitions going forward, and hopefully be able to not only share the information out with customers, but also be able to engage customers that are shopping in the store in a more proactive and integrated way. But we're still, like I said, in the discovery process.
That's great. And we'll ask the same question for the other two as well. So Jim, what about you? Does Gonzaga have a way that the public can view the competition data?
Yeah, we do. We have one of your storyboards for all the competitions that are going on. And we did the Lights Out Gonzaga. We had a very public display board, not only online, but also in our Hemmington Center, our student center. We try to put those results on the touch screens that are throughout the building.
That's great. And now we'll also extend this to George. Do you have a way for the public, whether it's students, staff, faculty, or anyone else, to view Frisco's data as well?
Yes, it's our energy management link on the district's homepage under departments. If you click on that, it opens our storyboard, and then there are little icons on the storyboard that has, I believe it's high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. You can click on those, and it gives you the usage for those schools. And then there's another icon that says Find Your School. Click on that, it opens up. Every single school is listed with the picture of the school, name, their motto, and then it has all utility usage there. And then the final little icon says competitions, and when you click on that, the little charts come up, however many groups you have. In our case, we had 7. We had 4 elementary, 2 middle school, and a high school. And it shows the name of the high school and where they are. I believe that's refreshed every day.
Yeah, and I think that's crucial. I think it's important that you all have a way for participants and the public to view the data, since feedback is a really important part of running a competition.
Hey, Abby, I love the next question that I wanted to sort of give to you to start with, because you run into a lot of these people that run competitions. Next question is a really good one. It's like, how do you keep people from gaming the system, essentially, right? It's like, if you have a baseline week or a set of weeks, and then you start the competition, how do you keep people from gaming the system and using, setting their baseline high and then showing a reduction in that?
That is a great question that I actually had to think through a little more deeply than I expected this year. For the first time, we actually ran a competition at our Lucid headquarters here. And putting that on, I had to think through, because our employees know how competitions work, so they understand really well how they could theoretically game the system. So I just didn't tell them when the baseline was, and we announced it as it was about to start so that they wouldn't have a chance to try to think through how to beat that. So I think one thing is the participants don't have to know when the baseline is, but if you are worried about them kind of getting excited about the competition and starting their behaviors early, you can try to time the baseline earlier, whether you give them a week in between or if it means using data from the previous year immediately before. There are a few different ways to go about that. And we have another question. This one's for George. For a school district competition, what suggestions do you have for getting word out and engaging all audience of these schools? So students, teachers, principals, about the competition, and how can we kind of extend that communication past email?
Well, we did it in a couple different ways. The very first thing we did is I was at a principals meeting, and everyone that district knows me. I've been here a long time, and I got up and I challenged them to save money. I actually showed them on the big screen, went to our webpage, showed them what the competition looked like, and they knew they were going to get money for their activity fund. And our principals are very competitive, as most people are, and the folks at Gonzaga understand that. And they want to be the best at whatever competition they're in. They want to have the best standardized test scores. They want to have the best attendance. They want to do all those things. So actually had principals calling me up and say, we're in first place yesterday. Today we're in second. What can we do to, get back in first place? Those kind of things. So for the first time in the 8 or 9 years that I've done this, I was actually getting calls from campuses on what they could do to reduce their energy usage. So
that's great.
We let the principals know, which is the route we took, and then we put it on our webpage and use social media. They're going to let the kids know. And every campus has what they call a green team that helps with recycling. They got those kids involved as well to do things. In Texas, we used to have, and they're coming back with a little program called Watt Watchers, where middle schools are real big on that. The kids go around at lunch, and if they find a teacher that's left their lights on or has their computer on, then they actually write that teacher a ticket and
I think that's key here, because I think the one thing that I want to add is using existing forms of communication is key. I think you don't have to set up an entire meeting with everyone from your district for this specifically, but tap into what already exists. If there are already teacher meetings or staff meetings, jump onto those and get a few minutes of those so you can spread the word and use whatever communication already goes out that people are already going to have their eyes on. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rolf.
Well, thank you so much. A special thanks to Tristan, to Jim, and to George for taking the time to share their learnings and their best practices with the audience here. It was great to see, actually, we had a great response to this, and I think it's super valuable information. Thank you, Abby, too, for leading our programs around competitions here and always being sort of a great cheerleader for getting these going and helping different organizations. And it's really exciting to see what was once something that really was more universities and so forth. Now we have companies like LinkedIn doing competitions to reduce plug load, and it's really become much more of a common thing to do across different organizations. Thank you very much, everybody, and we look forward to continued great content. We've got a webinar coming up in a few weeks that looks at a recent survey that we did around energy efficiency. We have well over 100 respondents tell us about what they're doing in this fall to reduce energy consumption and energy costs and how they're measuring that. So thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.